Hello everyone, this is Scarzig, and welcome back to another episode of Duelyst. Today, we're going to be playing some Lilith, and before we get into the deck list, I need to go over a couple things. I recorded this video last night, actually, but the audio was corrupted. This is actually going to be a re-recording. I really wanted to salvage the footage, and I figured it would be a good idea to be able to go over my, go over some of my past replays and analyze a bit more of my mistakes, especially for this video, because there were a couple moments where I made some key misplays, and some matches that just went really well, and I think that were pretty exciting. So I wanted to save those, and this will be a good opportunity to go over that. The logo I have behind me is just to help cover right, this is where my old webcam was, so I basically am just pasting a new cam over that layer to hide the old recording, and I'm just re-recording the audio now. So since we've got that out of the way, the deck list here is pretty interesting because there's a couple key omissions. For example, there's no Wraithling Swarm in this deck. With Swarm Lilith, you tend to get blown out a lot by, well, right now the major offenders are Plasma Storm, Tempest, and Frostburn, which I suppose have always been hell for a Swarm list. But this list is designed to get a lot of value out of not having so many minions on board, right? Typically, a Swarm list will just flood the board super hard. You can't deal with it, and they cash everything in on a Soul Grimoire, Deathfire Crescendo, or something like that, and then finish you off. This one is designed to go off really, really hard by only getting like 3 or 4 things to stick. That way, if you get blown out, it's still pretty easy to get bodies on the board. You can also kind of bait your opponent by not swarming the board super hard, because if you only have like 4, maybe 5 things on the board, they might just try to clear them manually instead of using their big AoE. One of the other things about this list is, it's just really solid. We have Blood Baronette, obviously, and that is going to help us maximize the value of Deathfire Crescendo. Shadow Reflection, giving a minion +5, is fantastic because you can, at 6 mana, you can get a 10 attack Wraithling, while a 12 attack Wraithling technically gets some nice burst there with just 2 cards, getting a Wraithling to stick to the board. Blood Moon Priestess is just kind of icing on the cake. We typically don't rely on them sticking, but if they do, it's just great. Shadow Reflection also allows you to let Blood Moon Priestess survive a Plasma Storm, which has happened. All the crazy scenarios and random synergies I built into the deck have actually ended up happening in real matches, which I think is pretty cool. We only have 1 copy of Shadow Sister Kalino in the deck, which I think is notable because this deck does like to survive to at least 6+. If you get good draws, you only need to be at like 7 or 8 mana to be able to cast 2 of your big combo buffs and then combine that, to just kill your opponent. And sometimes, being very aggressive, I think that because the way this deck is built, your opponent doesn't really want to go face on you super hard. They'd rather control your board a little bit at the same time. So it's like every time they stop to kill Furiosa or get a Wraithling out of the way, maybe that's 1 or 2 HP saved from your face. That's kind of the way I look at it, because Kalino is such a big liability in the Lion-R matchup, right? If you go up against Iran, you cannot play Kalino, because if they drop a Sunforged Lancer or Sunriser to take advantage of the HP, the healing procs, you just get blown out. Argion Highmane also has been recently dipping into those cards alongside Scintilla. Then you get like Sunforged Lancer and whatnot. I'm not sure if that's ladder viable just yet, or if that's just strictly tournament tech for now. But that was something I considered when I was making this deck. But overall, it's been doing me proud. One thing I also forgot to point out is Shadow Reflection also combines with Vorpal Reaver, so that if your opponent, can't deal with it, and or if they're super ahead, right, they think they can take that 12 damage, the Shadow Reflection makes it so that Vorpal Reaver is pretty much an OTK threat at that point in the game. Furiosa is a must-answer card for your opponent. They're going to try to take that out, and by using that removal, then maybe it lets your other minions stick a little bit better. Maybe that's one less removal for your Vorpal Reaver, or your Shadow Sister Kalino, or your Blood Moon Priestess, which is always nice in the long run. We have Gloom Chasers in the deck just as a solid 2-drop, and because we value Wraithlings a lot more. Again, a case could be made for Wraithling Swarm. We do have 3 copies of Sphere of Darkness in this deck to ping stuff and for card draw. I think this is really important for the deck because it doesn't have any other card draw, and just that little bit helps, right? These could easily be Blood Tier Alchemists. You could trade out Sphere of Darkness for Blood Tier Alchemist and maybe make some cuts here and there and put in Sojourners or Spelljammers instead, but typically you only need a little bit of a little bit of card draw in this deck, as long as you're playing your cards right. Every once in a while, you get those games where you're being forced to play on the back foot, and you're just playing out all of your Demonic Lures and Ritual Banishings, and it's just, those are games that you're probably just going to lose anyway. So if, like, you're in top deck mode, hoping for a miracle, then it's like something went wrong earlier in the game, in my opinion. So you don't really need to sweat not having card draw. Oh, but again, this is pre-recorded, so it looks like that's all the time I have to talk about the deck. But that's what we're rolling with now. One other interesting point that was brought up to me regarding the deck was the inclusion of Voidsteel or not. And I just like Ritual Banishing a little bit more than Voidsteel, because Voidsteel, when it's good, it's good. But Ritual Banishing just allows you to get a couple more procs off of your Blood Moon Priestess, or a couple more procs off of your Deathfire Crescendo. Every once in a while, you'll just need to answer a big threat, right? A big, something that's just super deadly that you need to take care of. And doing that at 4 mana and developing a Wraithling is just great for this deck. So, getting into this match, let's see. We're up against Lilithe. I'm considering keeping the Vorpal Reaver because I'm like, I'm going second. So, you know, you get to 6 mana a little bit earlier going second. So I'm seriously considering keeping the Vorpal Reaver. I do have Ooze and Demonic Lore to counter whatever my opponent opens up with, be it Azurite Lion or Windblade Adept. So I think that that's going to give me enough of an early advantage to where I can keep the Vorpal Reaver. So I'm going to replace the Primus Fist, looking to round out my hand a little bit more, since this is more than likely going to be my opening, right? The Ooze Demonic Lore. Deathfire Crescendo, I think I end up replacing this because that's smart. Yeah, because we don't need that combo piece right away. Every once in a while, you'll want to do Tempo Deathfire Crescendo, where if you think your opponent doesn't have the Dispel, you can use it to beef something up really early. Basically, you're taking advantage of the value when you have the chance. There are 3 copies of Deathfire Crescendo in this deck, so if you have the opportunity, then you just use it. Replacing Spectral Revenant, of course, and this is pretty much the scenario we were hoping for. We get to play Ooze on the mana tile, Demonic Lore, the Windblade Adept, get to kill that off, and only taking 2 damage in the process is really nice, because Windblade Adept is normally able to one-shot Ooze, so you miss out on a lot of value. And so now my opponent has no 2-drop. That doesn't affect Lilithe as badly, right? Because Silverguard Knight, Scintilla are both really good 3-drops. So denying their ramp isn't that big a deal. But we do get the Saberspine Tiger out of him, which is really nice because that takes his whole turn. And so now I'm thinking, well, I can just step forward. Do I want to take mana at this point? Do I want to... Ritual Banishing is always nice to keep versus Lilithe. She can take out those ranged threats. Throw in the Demonic Lore. That's pretty interesting. I think it's because I have the Ritual Banishing and access to my Bloodborne spell next turn that I decide to just throw it away in hopes of something else. I'm playing the Kalino here just because I don't really have any other play. And, you know what I mean? I'm using my 4 mana efficiently, and I'm playing her onto an empty board. And I see this until at this point I'm a little bit nervous because this is one of the concerns about this deck where I'm not sure if Argion is running crazy heal hybrid technology in the list. But fortunately, you see, I can get to this mana tile now. My opponent stepped up to take that mana that was far away, and so now I can ramp up to 6. And I'm thinking about how I want to do this. There's actually a little bit of a misplay on my part, I think, because I'm thinking about where I can play the Vorpal Reaver, where it's going to be pretty safe from his minions, but at the same time not playing into like a Sun Bloom. And looking at the board here, there's really nowhere for me to put it, because like I could put it above my general or diagonally from the Kalino there, where the Vorpal Reaver can just get hit by the Windblade Adept, possibly cleaned up by my opponent's general. So it would just die instantly. So he could like trade in those units and a little bit of his HP, and then Tempest, and then that just clears the Vorpal Reaver and the and all of the Wraithlings, right? So that's something that I wanted to play around. And looking at what I had available, I could have moved the Kalino to the corner and then play the Vorpal Reaver above that. But by doing this formation, I think the Vorpal Reaver being in the center is a bit more central. It's a bit more threatening. And unfortunately, this does play into Sunbloom. I said, you know what? I'm pretty much full HP right now. If Kalino gets dispelled, that's fine. If Vorpal Reaver gets dispelled, what this formation would allow me to do is just walk 2 to the right and then just move my units into a defensive formation to protect me. And so if that was the case, thinking about it, playing the Vorpal Reaver above the Kalino and putting the Kalino in the corner probably would have been a little bit better in that regard. And oh, right, the oops here. My opponent hits me with the Sundrop Elixir instead of his Windblade Adept. Now, I did point out at this point in the broadcast, I remember, that wasn't that big of a misplay. It was really unfortunate. He had to get a card out of his hand so he wouldn't burn because he cast Trinity Oath. But it's like, yeah, his Windblade Adept would be a 4-3 here. I'd be at slightly lower HP. But I pretty much do this same play, except I just bring the Kalino in to hit. So all in all, that wasn't that big a deal. And I'm thinking here like, oh man, if only the Vorpal Reaver, if only I'd placed it a little bit closer somehow, I could really get a big hit in. And I'm thinking about whether I actually want to go in this turn with the Vorpal Reaver. And then I'm like, oh, hell yeah, of course I do. You know, because I can just Primus Fist and then Shadow Reflection to get this huge chunk of damage in. So we get that 13 hit, and then we Shadow Spawn. And so minus the Sundrop Elixir, I'd be down to 17, which isn't that bad. And so, again, it was definitely a tragic misclick, but I had the answers to clear that Windblade Adept anyway. So all that would have done for him is just made me take an additional 4 damage, or rather have the Kalino take an additional 4 damage. So definitely, again, not that big a deal. Tempest, see, he has the Tempest too, which is one reason we moved the Vorpal Reaver out of the way into a defensive spot before we moved it in. But he can't actually, oh, wow. Yeah, so he just, I forgot about this part. He just kills himself. He goes Tempest, hits the Vorpal Reaver, and then Tempest. He gives up. Now, he had a full hand, right? Because he had Trinity Oathed. He wasn't able to move the Scintilla forward because of the placement of the Primus Fist, where he could have used the Scintilla to trade into the Vorpal Reaver. But sometimes you just don't have the answer, because, again, he could have had Sunbloom or something, or Martyrdom. I don't know. Linar can't really deal with big threats that much. They have to usually just play something bigger and force you to make a trade instead. But I was able to get that big hit in, which really let me close out the game. And that's what I love about Vorpal Reaver, is that it just lets you close out games if your opponent doesn't have the answer right there, right then. And because, again, this deck, your opponent might be answering your Ferocias, your Blood Moon Priestesses, it makes the Vorpal Reavers that much more of a threat. And right off the bat, we're going to replace the Blood Baronette and the Spectral Revenant, but we get another Revenant anyway. This opening here isn't that fantastic, right? Because Spectral Revenant, we want to replace. We have 2 copies in the deck, but we just want to look for something a bit early, a bit more defensive. Like an Ooze would be great here. So we replace the Spectral Revenant, and we get Blood Moon Priestess. Now, looking at this play, it's very obvious that my opponent is playing an aggressive deck. We have 2 Blood Tier Alchemists opening, and they both went face. And this lets him ramp up to 5 mana next turn. And I'm like, well, obviously, this is like a face deck. This is an aggressive deck. How do I want to play this? Because if I step forward, I'm going to take, you know, maybe 4 more damage. And I don't really have anything to contest this right now. So I'm like, maybe if I just play defensive, because I have the Blood Moon Priestess, right? I'm like, maybe if I just play defensive, I can get some really good trades on the Blood Tier Alchemists, and then go from there. And I took a while thinking about where I wanted to place these Gloom Chasers. So I was like, oh, I could step forward 1. And, oh, so I actually went, like, super defensive there. Just with the 1 Gloom Chaser. And I want to point out now, after this game played out, I felt that this was actually a mistake. I think I should have just been a man about it and went in and tried to contest a little bit of the mana right here, because he gets he ramps up to 5 Flameblood Warlocks, and he has 3 mana left over to play more stuff. Hits me with the Entropic Gaze. And then into another Entropic Gaze. So he gets like this extremely aggressive like Miracle opening that sets me down. I haven't even interacted with him yet. He's already got me down to 16 HP. So I think I could have taken a little bit of sting out of that. Contested some of these bodies a little bit more. Again, had I stepped forward a little bit. But right now, just kind of fishing for answers. I've got the Blood Moon Priestess. So... And I've got a couple really good trades lined up, because the Wraithling can go into the Blood Tier Alchemist, the Gloom Chaser can go into the Flameblood Warlock, and then that lets me get 2 Wraithlings off of the, 4 Wraithlings off the Blood Moon Priestess. And I'm thinking about how I want to place this, because you want to try to get the full surround. And I think that this is also a mistake, my movement with the Blood Moon Priestess here. Like, this guarantees, right, that I get my Wraithlings here, but I think if I had stepped, if I had stood my ground and then just played the Blood Moon Priestess behind me and then made those trades, I'd have 4 Wraithlings, and there still would have been an open spot, but I think that it would have been worth it to get more Wraithlings developed at this point. What's at least nice here is I'm able to safely develop the Blood Moon Priestess this turn because he doesn't have Plasma Storm. He's going to have it next turn, unfortunately. I don't have anything to combo with, which is what I would really like to see. I'd like to see a Deathfire Crescendo. And he burns my Spectral Revenant. That's really rough. But already you can see here I've cornered myself. So I think that moving up into this formation was pretty bad idea, because he just walks forward, hits me, because I'm still super low, and I can't go in. I can't interact or trade with him at this point in time. So Deathfire Crescendo again is something that I'm really hoping for. I've got Blood Baronette, but I need that to combo like around 6 mana. Ritual Banishing isn't going to serve me any purpose here, because my opponent is obviously just playing a smash, like a burn smash list. But I do have 5 mana, so what I can do is Cryptographer and also get 2 procs off of my Shadow Spawn, and with Furosa in the mix, I can get a pretty sizable board, because all of the procs from Furosa here would make all my Wraithlings into 3/3s, which I kind of want to go for. The tragedy really of this game is that he's forced me to a point where I have to develop a Swarm on this turn to help take some of this pressure off of me. But I'm forced to do it on a turn where he's going on to 5 mana next turn. So I'm just playing into Plasma Storm super, super hard at this point, and I have no choice. There comes a time, right, in every so often where you can't play around something, and you just have to do your best and hope they don't have it, right? And again, we're doing this play first with the Furosa into Shadow Spawn, into Cryptographer, into Shadow Spawn. Also misplay here with the you know, not moving my Wraithlings correctly, I miss out on a Wraithling. Huh. That Wraithling was only a 2/2? Oh, wait. I didn't notice that before. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, but there's the Plasma Storm. So definitely some mismanagement of movement, Wraithlings, Blood Moon Priestess placement there, I think, in the latter part of this game. And again, I think I should have tried to contest the center a little bit more. Even though my opponent was being aggressive, you can see he's actually down to 15 here. And I think had I not been so pressured up in this corner, I could have not taken such a devastating Plasma Storm. And maybe I would have had a bit more breathing room to kite with my Shadow Sister here. But my opponent is, yeah, just going to finish me off with Drogon. So I think this is a really good game to learn, right, about how to handle yourself against an opponent. Because basically that aggressive opening spooked me. And, you know, I showed my back to my opponent, essentially, and he took advantage of it. So definitely was a learning experience for me. A lot of misplays, too. I cracked under the pressure, like saying, oh, man, I need to get my Blood Moon Priestess up. How am I going to do this? And I was actually really, really glad that I got matched up against Magmar again. Because I was like, you know what? I wasn't, like, salty about the last match, right? I wasn't, like, super angry. But I did want to, you know, redeem myself a little bit. I was like, well, maybe I can do better. As I was playing that game initially, I was like, oh, I could have done this, I should have done that, da-da-da. It's always good to be analyzing your play, be mindful of what you could have done differently. Knowing that my opponent could be aggressive again, of course we don't want to keep the Vorpal Reaver. We want some more early game stuff. And I have the Ooze and the Cryptographer, which is just fantastic, right? That's a much more solid early game. There, I was talking about how my opponent faked like he was going to go diagonally and just threaten a tile instead of moving towards the center. But he decides to just move forward and not play anything. We have seen plays like that in the past, right? Where your opponent will just move up diagonal, threaten the top mana. Typically, that's what player 2 does when the first player has like a really strong opening. A really good example is if your opponent goes first as Lionheart and plays Windblade Adept, and you have nothing in your hand that could possibly answer it. You know, you just feel super bad, and so you just try to play defensively like that. But anyway, to get back into the game, I wanted to, again, apply what I learned from my last game to this one. So you can see, even I have a much better opening to contest the center with, but I'm contesting it regardless. My opponent doesn't have a turn 1 play, so I want to get bodies on the board. Cryptographer is going to set us up for nice Shadow Spawn memes, and Ooze being on the table like this is always great. My opponent plays the Azure Herald on the mana tile in order to deny it to me, which I guess is smart. I was hoping the Ooze would walk one space up, hit the Azure Herald, and then create a Shadow Creep tile underneath it and just one-shot it, essentially. That's what I really wanted to happen, and I was like, oh, that's unfortunate. So I just Shadow Spawn, and really don't have much else to play around with. I should have replaced a Ritual Banishing in this situation, in my opinion, to fish for something, but strange that I kept that. So I'm not sure what was going through my head at that point, what exactly I was fearing, what I wanted Ritual Banishing for. But anyway, my opponent kills the Ooze with his General. Azure Herald is actually a really good Wraithling Slayer at this point, right? A 1/3, you know, is strong enough to kill a bunch of Wraithlings and live. Diretide Frenzy, I didn't agree with at this point at all. I was like, yeah, you get some cheeky face damage because you can hit a Wraithling and get an AoE, but I didn't really feel it was that worth it. At the very least, my opponent actually forces me to take 2 damage here because I want to trade. So I'm like, so I guess I'll just finish this off for free. I take a little bit of damage. I pointed out at this point that this was a misplay, because I should have shadow spawned, I think, before I moved, because it would have been I suppose it would have been a higher chance anyway that the Wraithling would appear on that mana tile. And there was also another misplay where I could have played the Shadow Sister like all the way away from the fight if I had played it off of that Wraithling before I moved it. So overall, I was like, I made some really key misplays, and I think it was good to save this footage so I could point them out for you guys in terms of positioning the Shadow Sister. But I make the best of the situation where I play the Shadow Sister Kalino down here to bait him to going towards that corner to kill it. I figured that that would be the best case scenario, right? So, okay, he's got the Ephemeral Shroud. At first I thought, oh, if he was going to do like Flash War Beast, you know, hit the Wraithling and get an AoE. But dispelling the Shadow Sister is completely fine at this point, right? Because I still have a lot of HP. I don't really care about Shadow Sister. It's just kind of there for emergencies, and I played it there just because it was an on-curve play. It's not key to this deck the way it is for Cassava, where you need the healing in order to carry you guaranteed to the ultra late game, like 9+ mana. This deck usually just gets to 9 mana, and if it hasn't killed you by then, probably will kill you at 9, because like I've got Shadow Reflection in hand. If I were to get like Deathfire Crescendo or Blood Baronette, like I would just be able to kill him. And looking at the board here, I'm thinking about how I want these trades to go down. Deathfire Crescendo would be absolutely nuts, but we've got 6 mana, so I'm going to use my Wraithling and the young Lilithe to, the Wraithling and my General to kill the young Lilithe, and then my Wraithling trades into the Ephemeral Shroud. Now, this is a nice play here that I pointed out as I was making the video. When you want to take out a Rebirth minion, this is what you do. You kill it, turn it into an egg, and dispel the egg, rather than dispelling the minion and then killing it. Because the egg will never hatch, even if they have stuff like Egg Morph, the egg just doesn't hatch. And having that 0/1 on the board makes it so that they can't use natural selection on anything anymore. And leaving the egg around allows me to kill it whenever I see fit and get another death proc off of for the Deathfire Crescendo or something like that. So the stars really aligned there, where I was able to take advantage of that egg. But this was also a misplay. I should have moved my General 1 space back. I should have traded the Wraithling first, moved my General 1 space back, and then did that play where I dispel the egg and kill the young Lilithe, etc. That way there'd be another space of separation between me and the Shadow Sister, and he wouldn't have been able to get that War Beast off that hit my General in the face. So just, again, small positional errors like this were really making my life difficult, and I feel like just focusing a little bit more on the game and getting some more experience with Abyssian would really turn this deck into a devastating monster. Because, again, Swarm is so powerful. Deathfire Crescendo is an insane card, right? It's so hard to get a respectable amount of bodies on the board, especially in the current meta. And so basically, by making this deck around getting maximum power out of very, very low amounts of bodies and Wraithlings that stick to the board, you can do some really cool stuff. Now, this is actually an error. I was thinking I could have just Demonic Lord the Macantor War Beast and put it on a Shadow Creep tile, and then it would just die. Because, of course, I wanted to get rid of it. But that was the wrong way to go about it. I think I wanted to save the Demonic Lore to kill the egg, if need be. And you can see there that I actually held off on doing the Deathfire Crescendo that turn. Because I had the opportunity there, right, to Deathfire Crescendo and then Ritual Banishing and then kill the egg with my General. The problem there was that, hey, if I do that, sure, I have this one big Wraithling on the board, but then my opponent could use Thumping Wave on it or another Ephemeral Shroud and just dispel it. Typically, you want the Deathfire Crescendo to be a surprise factor, especially here where my opponent's trying to create distance, backing off, fishing for answers. I wanted to make sure that I was able to take him by surprise. So looking at this here, again, I have options where I can Demonic Lure the Shadow Sister Lilithe onto a Shadow Creep tile, and then the egg will die to Shadow Creep tile, but I need to get some procs on a Deathfire Crescendo. Since I got a Wraithling to stick, it definitely behooves me here, right, to get this rolling. And so even though the egg is going to die at the end of the turn, I hit here first in order to get that extra proc, because I dispel the stacks in order to get a hit in with a Wraithling. And then he gets rebuffed because of the Deathfire Crescendo. This is one of the nice things about it, is that as things die, the minion that you use Deathfire Crescendo on is able to heal itself. And I'm thinking, okay, well, you know, I'm playing into another War Beast, obviously. But I don't think my opponent probably would have just did another War Beast last turn, because I had Wraithlings on the board, right? Oh god. So my opponent plays Meltdown here, kills the Ephemeral Shroud. it needs to kill this Wraithling. And gets it. He gets the 50-50. And I was mad at this point. I was like, really? Now I have to deal with Meltdown. Fortunately, I have the Ritual Banishing. And I'm thinking about how I want to move here. Because there's really nowhere I can move that is out of range of the general, technically, unless I get a really good Wraithling spawn. But I do need to Shadow Spawn Ritual Banishing here to take out the Meltdown. Because I can't walk away from the Meltdown either. And then, you know, I just take 14 damage. But we just kill the Meltdown and try to go from there. We do get a Body Blocker Wraithling, which is beautiful. At this point, I'm like, well, I do have Spectral Revenants in the deck. I can use that to finish it off. And again, a few misplays like really put us at this juncture. See, my opponent even goes down to 6. He doesn't want to leave a Wraithling on the board, which is really smart here, because, I mean, I could Shadow Reflection, I could do any sorts of things. This is also one of those rare instances where I'm out of cards because the game has gone on like past 9 mana. And I get the Spectral Revenant replace / top deck because the Drogon was going to kill me next turn. There was no way for me to get away from him, and I figured, yeah, you got lucky with the Meltdown there. I get to be a little bit lucky with the Spectral Revenant, so I didn't feel too bad about that win. Very, very sloppy play led to that point where I had to, you know, pray to the gods. Oh, spooky head there poking out. But anyway, I decided to, at this point the video is already pretty long, right? And I'm like, you know what? These last few games have been like really, really sloppy. I'm going to play another one. I want to try to get like a really nice, like convincing game with this deck because it's really strong. I have a couple, I think when I started this recording, I was on like a 6 win streak. So I know that this deck is pretty decent because right now I think I'm only playing in like gold rank. So it's decent for most players in the game. Most players are inhabiting the gold division, and as it's been said in the past, you can get to diamond playing pretty much anything as long as you play it well. So if you're a fan of Abyssian, you know, give this deck a shot as a nice baseline. It's really easy to edit it to your tastes. With, again, Blood Tier Alchemist, Wraithling Swarm, Lady Locke was a consideration. But starting off this game, I've got Furiosa Cryptographer. And the young Silithar is there, but I think that all things considered, right? Because I've got the Blood Moon Priestess as well. I've got like solid opening Swarm hand, and I think that I just want to go for it because there's really not going to be a better opportunity for me to try to get an early advantage and hopefully get something down before Plasma Storm drops, because this deck has the potential to ramp into certain mana costs and take advantage of Deathfire Crescendo with your opening like 2 or 3 bodies. So we play the Furiosa first before we move, so it's all the way in the back now. That way we can play Cryptographer on the mana tile and get our 2 Wraithlings. And then I replace the Gloom Chaser because I already have bodies on board and I don't need the Gloom Chaser anymore. Of course I replace last. I replace after I make that play. But all things considered, there probably wasn't any other card I could have gotten that I would have played to change what I was going to do there, just because it was so perfect. I remember when I was recording, I said maybe if I had gotten Ooze, I would have done just Cryptographer Ooze, and then just waited for next turn, because I'd just have more bodies on board, and a little bit more pressure against the young Lilith with an Ooze on board, but this is overall pretty nice, and I didn't get the Ooze anyway. But my opponent here, showing off the Azure Herald early, showing off the natural selection, definitely signals to me that he's going to be playing a mid-range / control deck. Although those pieces typically go towards Voth Smash decks, which is pretty much the standard nowadays. Since the Entropic Gaze nerf, you don't have the luxury of just backing off and letting like Decimus and stuff burn your opponent out. So you want to go in. The Drogon combo is extremely good, and it was just that, you know, Entropic Gaze has infinite range. You were doing basically comparable amounts of burst and not being forced to, you know, go willy-nilly into your opponent's forces. Huh. Now this is curious that I didn't take out the young Lilith. I think that I wanted to just preserve this board. That way I could trade it in with the Blood Moon Priestess up. So I think that that's why I made this play. I was like, I'm going to deny that mana and just keep the Wraithling in reserve, because the young Lilith can only trade into me right now, and then that leaves the egg up for shenanigans. Like, I can take care of, I can use that body as a free kill to proc Blood Moon Priestess. The unfortunate thing, once again, is that my board got cleaned up pretty nicely, and my opponent's going to be going into 5 mana next turn. Plasma Storm is always such a huge thing that you need to play around. I think what I should do is probably just play a Blood Moon Priestess and get as many procs as I can, and basically force him to have the Plasma Storm, because it's going to take his whole turn anyway. Okay, so there's the Drogon, which is very smart. I liked that he played that here, because he has his Bloodborne spell next turn, and getting Drogon developed on an empty board where you pretty much say, "Oh, I don't think my opponent can deal with this," is one thing. But I'm like, oh god, am I really gonna have to do this? Yeah, so I Drogon here. I Demonic Lord the Drogon, and then use my Wraithling and the General to kill it. I said, you know what, I'm just going to take this 5 damage. This is me, again, trying to be a bit more aggressive, a bit more manly in this matchup in order to keep from getting overwhelmed, because I could have easily walked away or used the, I could have used the Shadow Reflection on the Wraithling to save myself a little bit of HP, but it's just such a good, like, finisher and such a good combo piece for this deck that I wanted to hold on to it. Now I've got 2 Wraithlings on board, and I'm like, well, now, you know what I mean, you have to trade your board into these, because I know you want to clear the Wraithlings, and basically all it's doing is just softening up all of his minions, so then I can get really, really good trades on them later and proc the hell out of my Blood Moon Priestess. I'm still really, really nervous at this point that he has the Plasma Storm, But one of the also pie in the sky things I was hoping for was possibly being able to survive to 7 mana and then do Blood Moon Priestess, Shadow Reflection, and then that way it's sitting down as an 8/3 and it's immune to Plasma Storm, and it forces him to have like Thumping Wave or something to kill it instead, which is definitely something to consider. And I was very interested to see this play because my opponent plays the Grow down there in the away from the fight, when I think that he could have just played it maybe behind the Azure Herald or something and let it scale up a little bit more before it got into the fight. This is really cool though, because he's thinking, okay, well, he's corralled from the Grow, and he's trying to like pressure me into this bottom corner, right? He's like, the Rancor is above and that can close in, and the Grow is below and that's going to close in. And so I am like super nervous at this point. I'm like, oh god, how am I even going to handle this game? Because I can step down, hit the Grow, and then, you know, oh god, does the Grow, it's just going to hit me back because it gets stats before it does that. It's like I can't clean it up in one turn. The Rancor is still there threatening to kill me because he can come down with his general, slap me, and then so I move the Grow. This is interesting. So what I was hoping there is that a Wraithling would have spawned in the space below my general, and the Grow would just tank at that point. And I'm thinking to myself here, well, the young Lilithe, I played the Blood Moon Priestess before I was able to combo with Shadow Reflection, and I have the Spectral Revenant in hand, so that's why I replaced the Shadow Reflection there. I was like, well, I'm not going to need this then, because I'm not going to have a body to play it on, and I have a 7 mana play next turn. And if you look at this here, I figured that this would be the case. Playing the Blood Moon Priestess there would force him to want to kill it with his general. And so because he had to move his general to that spot in order to kill the Blood Moon Priestess, the Rancor can't reach me this turn. So this is, I felt pretty proud about the way that this turn lined up. My opponent basically took the bait there. Would have been better, again, if I didn't have to Demonic Lure the Grow. If I would have got that, like, the best Wraithling spawn, where the Grow would have just tanked a Wraithling. But this allows me to create more distance against the Rancor, because again, he body blocked his own minion to take out the Blood Moon Priestess. He could have used the Rancor for that purpose, but he's valuing this huge amount of burst. So I kill the egg with the Spectral Revenant, which is huge, because I get to deal the 4 damage with its ability and not take any hits back, and then put it in range of the Grow. So it turns out that that Demonic Lure on the Grow is actually like a completely like disgusting prophecy play. And so he just took 8 damage from the Spectral Revenant, and it's still alive as a 6/2. You can see here he's using the young Lilithe to body block me. He really wants this Rancor to touch me. And this minion is, again, super threatening. He's got the War Beast, which is just great. Just great. He has to use Flash Reincarnation, though. He uses Flash Reincarnation to bring out the Mechantor War Beast. So that he's able to take that out and develop the Grow. He'll have enough mana left over to play Grow to keep me corralled down here next to the Rancor. But, as you can see, my opponent's at 8 HP. I can just step 1 back, kill the young Lilithe, and then the Grow hits the Spectral Revenant again, and then he just dies. So, that ended up being like a really big misplay on his part. So Spectral Revenant is OP. Nobody's denying that. And it just carried me there at the last second. But I think that match was definitely worth it, because I was able to force my opponent to make a decision that looked good, looked like it was good for him, but actually ended up being very beneficial for me. And so yeah, that was the fourth game. Thank you for stopping by for this post-mortem voiceover of these matches. Again, it was really fun for me to be able to go over my my previous matches and see where I made mistakes and maybe see what I could have done differently, but also still being able to use some of this footage that I had recorded for you lovely people. So thanks for stopping by. I will see you next time, and you have a good one.